Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the grand finals of Domestic High School League of the 4th Gwangju Youth English Debating Championship. My name is Ju Kyung-Pak, professor at Honam University, and I'm the chair of this session. Before we begin today's debate, I'd like to congratulate both teams for coming this far. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to our grand finalists. Thank you. Today we have the motion. This House believes that people who finish mandatory military service should receive extra credit when applying to become civil servants in Korea. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome the Prime Minister to the podium.
There are three major responsibilities citizens should fulfill under the name of the law. First, responsibility of paying taxes. Second, responsibility of education. And third, responsibility of mandatory military service. However, these mandatory military service is targeted mainly to men, and considering these advantages that would be got from the society, considering the unequal status quo, what the government should actually give to these people is extra credit. But before I go on to my argument, let me define some key terms of today's motion. The first one is military service. Military service is service by an individual or group in an army, which excludes the involuntary draft in today's debate. And in case of mandatory, it means the government leaves no choice for the youth of our country but to participate in such military action. And extra credit will be defined as while applying for employment, these people who have participated in military services will get credits, which will be further elaborated in my policies. And also, I as the Prime Minister will describe the civil servants as public officials. And we have developed the two-step policy, which we call the 2-2 policy for today's debate. So first of all, we're going to set the maximum limit on credit given to the receivers as 2%, as the 2% of 100%. So we've set this limit based on the survey done by the Equality Center. This survey was targeted to both men and women, and 50.7% of people chose 2% of the total score is legitimate amount of extra credit given to these people. And also for the second step, we are going to set the time limit on when can these extra credits can be used, and we're going to limit the time as 2 years, and we set this time limits relying on the survey that 70% of people who successfully got employed as civil servants in Korea and claimed that 2 years is a legitimate time for one to study and actually be the civil servant for our society. And also, in order to perfectionize our policy, we're going to give credits to not only the men who have participated in mandatory military service, but also every people who try to fulfill their duties of military service. And we're going to set today's debate the boundary as South Korean society. So let me go on to my first argument, which is the justification. So let us consider the status quo of today. If I ask any one of these people gathered here whether you want to go to military service once more or earlier, then I know what the answer would be. The answer would be no. Well, in fact, according to the statistics done by the Mail Economic Times, 0.3% of people said yes when asked, do you want to go to military service? Then why did this happen? Why did this happen? Did this happen because of bad military lunch? No. Did this happen because there are no mattress for these soldiers to sleep on? No. This happened because military service actually secludes you from the rest of our society and actually makes you stay in one simple society of military service, which is completely different from our society, and that gives a sense of seclusion. And the young men with so many potential, the young men who ought to be working hard to achieve one's dream, are deprived of the opportunities because they're secluded from rest of our society. They lack time to study. They lack private time. They lack overall possibilities of developing oneself. Well, some might ask, oh, that's the reason. It's the exact reason why we should give them no credits, because these people did not develop themselves in military service, so they are not qualified. But no, let me give you an example. If I am bad, if I is not very enthusiastic in academics, if I am not a very good student, and if I did not study well before I go on to the military service, would I be able to get hired 2 years after and 4 years after I got released from this military service? No. People who actually have potential, people who have possibilities get hired. However, because of the status quo, because government actually took the 2 years of the youth age, because the government took the 2 years where one can be the most brilliant in one's life, the government is paying back the young veteran the time they had wasted, the time they had spent on the military service. Yes, ma'am.
Why do you believe that the policy to deal with the problems that those inequality problems that those people who serve mandatory military service, why do you think that specific policy needs to be giving them credit in civil service exams?
Because in this policy I'm talking about right now, we're focusing on the possibility and the time that the youth had wasted, and that will be further elaborated by my Deputy Prime Minister by talking about the fairness of our policy. So we're not being emotional, we're not being irresponsible, and we're not being illogical in today's debate. What we're actually trying to do is giving these people the 2 years they had lost before, and setting the equality of our society by doing so. Then that leads to my second argument, efficiency. So in my first argument, I have elaborated why this policy is needed in our society. Then I'll explain why this policy is effective in its own way. According to Junhong Daily, it is known that 12 of the participants who actually participate and try to become employed by as the civil servants, 12.9% of them are changed according to this Junhong Daily because they get credits. And these 12.9% of people, as I elaborated before in my speech, are thought to be the people who actually have potential to develop themselves and have their possibilities. And these people who deserves to get 2 years they had lost before are getting what they need, and that's the efficiency of our policy. And that's why we believe this extra credit is needed in our policy. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 6 minutes and 57 seconds.
Now I'd like to welcome the Leader of Opposition to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister has spent 6 minutes and 20 seconds or something elaborating her main points on the need for certain types of aids for those who served military service. And we totally agree to this stance, because today's motion is not whether we should help those people who actually suffered for those mandatory military service, but it's rather do we need to give them extra credits. And the most important part of our motion is the methodology. And methodology is the part that the side opposition is actually proposing to tackle on. Before I move on to my arguments, I would like to rebut some of the points made by the Prime Minister of the side proposition. First, she gave us two main arguments. First was about the need, and second was about the efficiency. And before elaborating with her two arguments, she suggested us a policy called 2-2 policy, on the unrealistic traits of this 2-2 policy and how this policy has so many holes that it cannot actually be implemented in our society successfully will be further elaborated in my speech. And to moving on to her first argument about need, she kind of justified her proposal by saying she's not bounding she's binding objects not only to men but those whoever serves those mandatory services. However, today's motion is should we give extra credits to those who served mandatory services? And in Korea, in the status quo, only men are serving mandatory services, and we don't impose the burden of responsibility of military services to other people. So I think that setting of boundary was kind of irrelevant to the topic. And one more thing about that, she mentioned that 0.3% of the people would like to go to military, even if they are not forced to go to military. And this number is so obvious, and we do also agree that a lot of people don't want to go to military services. However, she said that it's not because military services don't provide them with betting or something. However, we do believe that those military hardship is a major factor that a lot of people, so many men, are scared of going to military services. Well, we do agree, as I've already mentioned in our rebuttals, that well, thanks, ma'am. No thanks, ma'am. We do agree that certain kinds of aids or certain kinds of incentives or compensations for those who serve military services is important, but we do not believe that the methodology must be extra credit, as the side proposition is trying to prove. And to move on to her second argument about efficiency, she said that 12.9% has took advantage of this new policy. However, the number is we want to focus on number. Among all the men who actually served military services, only 0.5% of them actually got employed as civil servants, and that means her number 12.9% came from the population group of those who are employed as civil servants. However, if we change the prism of numbers, if we look at all men who actually serve military service, only 0.5% of them are actually being benefited by this policy of extra credit. So we believe that this policy is leaving out a lot of people, the majority of men who have served military services, out of the range of privilege, and at the same time, this is thus not so much effective. Now, moving on to our arguments, our side has two main arguments for our stance. Our side has three main arguments for our stance, and I'll explain two on this podium. First is about the justification, and second is about the problem of equality, and third is about the necessity. Moving on to our first argument about justification, as I've already mentioned in the introduction of my speech, we do agree and we do admit that there must be some kind of measures to pay off for those people who have lost 2 years in their 20s valuable years by the mandatory military service. However, we're tackling over the methodology, as we repeatedly emphasize, and we believe that giving extra credit to those people who served military service is not the most adequate policy we can take in this status quo. This has two main problems in terms of justification. First is that this policy conflicts with the notion of equality of opportunities. Because this policy by actually adding those points in their evaluation process, which is the last process they do, it's rather closer to guaranteeing the equality of the result, not the equality of the opportunities. And the virtue that Korean government and most democratic countries are pursuing for is the equality of opportunities. That's why we execute public educations, and that's why we do so much welfare and stuff. That's all about equality in opportunities. However, we cannot agree with their arguments on equality of the results, which is giving them extra credits at the last step of evaluation, adding those points to their scores. Okay, should I continue? And our second point is that this policy is not so much effective, and this policy cannot accomplish its own goals. Well, for this policy to be an adequate policy, it has to be beneficial to many people, and it has to actually contribute to the increasing morale of those people who are going to the military services, because that's what the Prime Minister mainly talked about, increasing the morale of those people, because they are so much discouraged in the status quo. However, as I've already mentioned in the rebuttal process, only 0.5% of the whole people going to those military services are being benefited by this extra credit policy, and this leads to serious social problems like social justice, because 99% of those people cannot be benefited from their efforts in the military service, while only 0.5%, which is a small minority, can be benefited from this policy. Moving on to our second argument, this is about the problem of equality. We have three main levels for this problem of equality. First is about people's right to take or hold a public office, and I'll mention two separate minority groups. First is women, and second is the disabled. Does everyone know that this specific agenda has been judged by the law of Korean court in 1999? And when the case was sent to the court, the main logic of the court was that this policy unreasonably and unjustifiably imposes reverse discrimination on many people, and that was women and disabled people. Although the number from all men is 0.5%, because this policy was implemented at that time, more than 10% of the women and 10% of the disabled people were kind of disadvantaged from the extra credit system that the proposition side is kind of proposing, and this was a huge social problem then, and that was the main reason why the Court of Korea disapproved of this policy. And we can further conclude that this policy doesn't have any constitutional backgrounds because everyone knows that employment problem is a very serious problem of our society. However, as we've already proven, it doesn't fit to the principle of equality, and thus it's not so much effective. And then, promoting this policy is not going to be desirable in our society. I yield my time.
Speaker spoke for 7 minutes and 29 seconds.
Now I'd like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister to the podium.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. There is an old Korean saying that time is gold. This emphasizes the importance of time and how it cannot be achieved easily. 2 years, ladies and gentlemen, this is how long all men have to spend in the military. As Deputy Prime Minister of this debate, I stand upon this podium to firmly maintain that people who finish mandatory military service should receive extra credit when applying to become civil servants in Korea. We, the government side, has prepared 3 arguments for today's debate, but before moving on, I would like to first point out our honorable opposition side's big mistakes. So the opposition leader's major problem was that, he did seem to rebut some of our Prime Minister's point, but however, did he really actually listen to our Honorable Prime Minister's speech? That's the question, everyone. So first of all, he did agree on his point that it was necessary to help these men from their hardship, but the methodology was wrong. However, we believe that economically and as a government, we have to imply what is the most effective policy in this current situation. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that this is the policy that fits the best in our current society and the status quo, and which will be elaborated more on our third argument. And secondly, he also mentioned that only men are serving as mandatory military services right now, and our Prime Minister gave the wrong definition. However, we are not saying that women have mandatory military service. We are saying that because this motion is related to men who have mandatory services, but however, we will not restrict women from getting those rights too. So we will elaborate this on our third argument also about fairness. And moving on to our third rebuttal, the leader of opposition also mentioned that 0.3% that said that agreed on this point. However, the hardship is why men are scared, and we want to thank the leader of opposition for saying this, because that was our exact point, saying that the hardships are the matter that deters people from going to the military, and this is why we have to impose this policy upon the society, ladies and gentlemen. And moving on to the fourth rebuttal, the leader of opposition also mentioned that only 0.5% actually gets employed, so this policy is ineffective. However, ladies and gentlemen, we want to emphasize that they did not provide us any source about this, and furthermore, even if the statistic they say is right, is 12.9 a small number? We do not think so. In this whole society, is 12.9 a small number? It still affects on people, and whether it's small or not, what is important is that it made a difference in the society, and that's what we have to aim for, helping the minorities and the poor from getting more help. And the opposition leader also went on to his 2 arguments, saying that it does not have justification and it is not ineffective. And I would like to reply on this for two reasons. He mentioned about justification and said it was not equal. However, this will be further elaborate on my argument. But what does What does equality mean? Does the opposition side really know what equality means? And in the opposition point's objective, they already violated equality by sending men to mandatory military services. Why are women going to mandatory services? In that point, that has to be the same logic. But however, this does not stand on this motion today. And moving on to the seventh rebuttal about effectiveness, the opposition side said that policy that the policies have to contribute to the society in order to say that it is effective. However, we did say that it was effective according to our Honorable Prime Minister's speech, and we didn't elaborate enough that it was the most effective policy that could be set on this current society. And now I would like to move on to our two main, our third and last arguments. And the opposition side said that we lacked in constitutional background, but we will provide that on our third and last argument. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to suggest one key word about my argument before moving on to my last point, which is fairness. According to the Constitution, the government side has the obligation to maintain fairness. As our wonderful Prime Minister elaborated on the justification, I would like to explain why and how the process can be so fair and how it can be the most effective policy that could be applied to the status quo. Ladies and gentlemen, most people who stand against giving additional points, such as the opposition side today, say that the process cannot be fair and questions, do these additional points have the equal value as the time men spent in the military? I would like to answer this question on two levels.
Ma'am?
Oh, yes, sir? Yes, ma'am.
Don't you think that the policy that the proposition is insisting today is providing people with equality of the results, not opportunity, and that the status quo with supporting career programs that are provided to those people who serve military is a better solution?
We will provide that on furthermore on our arguments, but we certainly believe that this is the most effective way to provide them some ways to alleviate their disadvantages, and we will further provide that on our arguments. So I would like to answer to this question on 2 points. So firstly, the citizens who are the objectives of this policy, ladies and gentlemen, agree that this is a necessary job and that it has to be done in order to achieve fairness. If this is not the most effective policy, why do more than 85% of citizens agree on this policy? We want to give the burden to the deputy leader of the opposition. And according to a research made by the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, for 83.5% of the adult citizens agreed that extra points should be given to people who completed military services, ladies and gentlemen. Even 79% of the women agreed. And most importantly, more than 85% of the citizens who are in charge of their employments, who are directly related to the problem of employment we see as the important task today, agreed to this point, ladies and gentlemen. As a democratic government, why should this idea be deterred if so many people agree on it and it is so effective? Moving on to the next level, the National Defense Committee announced that they have prepared a policy law based on the Constitution that can enforce fairness in this process. There are two major policies protecting these fairness, like our Prime Minister has mentioned. First, the extra credit should be less than 2% of the point they have achieved on their exams and interviews. Secondly, people who get accepted through this policy cannot exceed over 20% of the total entries. This is a policy that goes along with the Constitution number 39 that requires the government to protect at the least equality that is present in the current society. Now, ladies and gentlemen, why should such an idea be deterred when its justification, necessity, and fairness is proven by law and democracy? We, the government side, has the right and obligation to have such an idea in order to work for the management of the country. We, the opposition side, believe that the government side, believe that everyone in this conference room, including the opposition side and all the audiences and the adjudicators, would have known that this debate was not a matter to debate on in the first place, and that it was clearly ours, the government side's win in the first place. Everyone lets democracy and fairness flourish in this country, especially in the city of Gwangju. Thank you, and I would like to yield the rest of my time to the government whip.
Speaker spoke for 7 minutes and 26 seconds.
Now I'd like to welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition to the podium.
We will first like to rebut some points from the government side and then move on to our argument. Statistics. That's all they talked about. Statistics cannot be the right justification for this kind of controversial issues. From the beginning, by setting this limitation of 2% and 2 years, they used statistics. And we believe that this cannot be justified statistic because statistics can always be changed by how many people, who did that, and which kind of institution did that, and what kind of people were participated in this statistics. And also, they keep using these numbers again and again in their main arguments as well. For example, fairness. we believe that what they need to do is provide a logical way to understand more to make people to understand why it is real fair, although despite the
On that point, ma'am.
points that we mentioned as a disabled person or woman. They just said 85% agreed, 83.5% agreed, and 79 was woman. They just keep repeating these numbers as a justification for their arguments. And also, our POI give them a burden too. Why do we have to persist this policy, this specific policy of giving them a credit? But they keep saying that it is effective, and they said they will further elaborate in their argument, but we believe not. We believe that they failed
On
to
the
do
point,
that.
ma'am?
No thanks. And then I would like to move on to our point, which is this could be a rebuttal for their major arguments as well. This is also related to our POIs and why we keep asking that why the government side should promote this specific policy, even though we have another alternatives as well. Our third argument is about unnecessity. Proposition seems
Before we
to...
move on, ma'am,
Yes?
didn't the opposition agree that the necessity of alleviating the disadvantages is needed?
Yes, we agree that we should have some kind of compensation for those people who devoted in this mandatory military service. But we're asking to the government side that why it has to be a credit. Because in my speech, I will further explain that we already have many policies that gives a compensation for these people and other alternatives as well. Our third argument is of necessity.
Before you go on, ma'am.
No thanks. Proposition seems to have lack of information about privileges that are already provided to the people who finish mandatory military service. And we, the side opposition, insist that we already have enough policies and systems that help getting jobs as compensation for devoting to mandatory military service. We would like to explain various policies that already exist to support them in several aspects. One of the main points that the proposition asserts is the lack of job experience of 2 years of those who participated in military services. However,
Wait, ma'am.
no thanks. According to Article number 4 to Career Education Law, that was upgraded in 2010. Career Education Law was enforced so people in military service can have job experience, different term and different kind of job for each individual. It won't be worth more than real job experience, but this is what government can do as possible to give them opportunities to keep touch within their careers. Not only this, but government directly provide financial aids to those in military service as well. Government provides them aid.
Point, ma'am.
No thanks. Government provide them aid to entrepreneurs and support money for transition for jobs. Moreover, government is promoting a policy that straightforwardly provides job opportunity privilege for a special major. Therefore, we strongly urge that the government is already offering sufficient privileges for employment of those people in status quo in the aspect of experience, financial support, and hiring policy. And we believe that there is no necessary for them to promote this specific kind of policy that violates rights of women and disabled person. And this is the reason why this policy was banned in our history. But they're saying that we have to do this again because it is effective.
Point, ma'am.
No thanks. Therefore, we still want to give them a burden to prove why this policy. And the last point to rebuttal. Previous speaker mentioned that giving women also credit for military service is a right definition. But what we are saying is that that definition by side proposition does not solve the problem of inequality. And this is our end of speech, and thanks for listening.
Speaker spoke for 6 minutes and 3 seconds.
Now I'd like to welcome the government whip to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, since the methodology was the only issue in today's debate, I'm here to declare that we have the correct method, and throughout this debate we have proved that this method is the correct way and the only way to solve this problem. Regarding the problems and the alternatives that was mentioned by the Deputy Leader of Opposition. And both teams, ladies and gentlemen, agreed on the necessity of helping people who serve military service, and also agrees on the effectiveness, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll be glad to mention once more that this policy actually works. The government throughout this debate had to prove three main aspects. First, the people who serve military service are disadvantaged, and second, the government is justified in helping them in getting jobs. And third, the method of helping people become civil servants is a legitimate method, and which is the main aspect that we proved today. And the government whip, I would like to explain the government succeed in providing all three aspects. And before I move on, I would like to mention some rebuttals that to be made. The Leader of Opposition mentioned that justification, and the justification should be about same equal opportunities, not equal outcome, ladies and gentlemen. Exactly, ladies and gentlemen. People who serve military service do not have equal opportunities. They lose 2 years, ladies and gentlemen, with doing nothing, that they cannot be provided. The Deputy Leader of Opposition mentioned about this alternative, that people can actually work like they're in workforce and have experiences in military service. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to ask all of you in this place, that is this the status quo, ladies and gentlemen? Can people in the military have experiences that they have similar experiences in the workplace? As the Prime Minister mentioned, that this experience can be possible. However, this experience is only in a secluded society called military, ladies and gentlemen. This is a different society, secluded by the society in the real world. So we declare that this is not an appropriate alternative. And second, about constitutional backgrounds, which was fully mentioned by the Deputy Prime Minister, which doesn't make the rebut stand. And also, they also tackled on us by saying that we depend on numbers, ladies and gentlemen. That's the same with the opposition side. And ladies and gentlemen, this can be considered as contradiction, and it was against, since both ideas were also mentioned about statistics and numbers, and which is important in this debate because this is about the legitimacy of this policy. And since most people agree, and since most people think that this is legitimate, ladies and gentlemen, this can be a supporting reason and a number that actually supports this policy. Now, moving on to the three clashes, ladies and gentlemen: justification, fair competition, and effectiveness. I'll first like to mention justification, ladies and gentlemen, the justification of the method itself, ladies and gentlemen. The government's proposal about justification can be explained into two major levels. Analysis. I'll mention the keywords of this very motion, ladies and gentlemen: mandatory and civil servants. The government explained in this very podium that mandatory military service of South Korea is a result of political issues and the correlations between all the other nations. And currently, in the current society, that we have a strict military system. And in this system, ladies and gentlemen, people who serve military service cannot do anything else, cannot have free time. They do not have time to work and prepare for the circumstances after military service, such as jobs, specs, or any other aspects, ladies and gentlemen. As a result, people who serve military service are violated their rights from the beginning till the end, ladies and gentlemen. And thus, the motion of this debate stands completely reasonable for the government to give chances to people that the government actually used to secure the hazard of nation. People they themselves did not give the opportunities and time, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why it is considered legitimate for the first reason. And second was the civil servants, ladies and gentlemen. Giving guidance to private entrepreneurs might be violating their rights because the entrepreneurs have their own rights to pursue and choose their own people. However, ladies and gentlemen, in cases of civil servants, ladies and gentlemen, civil servants, the policy stands firm, ladies and gentlemen. First, these are the people who are mandatorily working for the government. And in this case, where the government infringes upon the rights of citizens and with legitimate reasons, ladies and gentlemen, it is also their duty to minimize the disadvantages they get, and therefore it is justifiable. And second, people who receive extra credit and entered government organizations are not people who lack of skills, but people who have much potential, ladies and gentlemen, much potentials, but did not have time, just simply did not have time, and were disadvantaged by this policy that the government has, that they have to actually serve the duty, ladies and gentlemen. Thus, the government declares the motion is perfectly justifiable, and we take the first class justification of methodology and the means and everything home, ladies and gentlemen. And the second class, ladies and gentlemen, was about fairness of the competition. While the government succeeded providing that the policy alleviates current problems, ladies and gentlemen, which means the government's claim was too much reverse discrimination and has actually failed to be persuasive, ladies and gentlemen. I have, first, if extra credit was too much of a benefit to overweigh military service, ladies and gentlemen, there is no reason for 96% of male responding that they prefer no military service than over those points, extra credits they will get. And there's no reason for 97% of female to answer yes to this problem and that they will not serve military services. And this is a debate about male and mandatory military service, but the fact that even women who does have choice will not choose to go to the army anyways and lose 2 years totally vanished away because there are too much things they lose, ladies and gentlemen. The opposition did not give any reason why this harms fair competition, ladies and gentlemen. They mentioned about women and disabled people. However, ladies and gentlemen, women also do have choice, and we declared that in the Prime Minister's speech, we declared that women also has choice to go to the military service and actually get extra credits. And also, they mentioned about disabled people, ladies and gentlemen. Disabled people are already treated with social welfare. Enough social welfare, and they're treated with sufficient enough, it might not be sufficient enough, but the problem is totally different because these disabled people have chances and will have chances according to a different problem called social welfare, and they have quotas in many jobs and requirements that they can actually participate in work. And more importantly, it is not about, since disabled people are more infringe upon their rights, we should be abolishing, which is looking at these people, men's rights actually infringed upon. The problem we have to solve is both, and the government is here to say that we should solve this problem of men, and that is why we declare that we take the second clash home. And moving on to the third clash, effectiveness, ladies and gentlemen. The Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister constantly mentioned that throughout this policy, the government can actually meet the original goals, ladies and gentlemen, and provide statistics that says that policy alleviates current problems of women proceeding and being advantaged by the obstacles that men have up to 12.9%. The opposition tackled upon this point by saying that 0.5% is not enough. However, ladies and gentlemen, first, 0.5% is not a small number because in concerning the numbers of people who actually go to military in the status quo, this cannot be considered as a small number of people being infringed upon their rights. And second, even if it covers a small amount, the problem is that it makes more than 12.9% of people who actually take disadvantages, ladies and gentlemen. This should be treated as a problem. As I mentioned in the further speech, that this is problematic and the government should be responsible. Not saying that since it's such a small number we can't do it. We should do this policy because it actually can solve the problem. Thus, ladies and gentlemen, by taking all the three clashes of this debate, the government declares that we take this debate home and we're still proud to propose. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 7 minutes and 21 seconds.
Now I'd like to welcome the opposition whip to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, throughout today's debate, side proposition and side opposition have been watching how the government side is actually avoiding to prove the things that they needed to do to prove the justification of this policy and actually try to move our vision, our focus of this motion on the equality issues and the rights issues and just try to avoid their responsibilities to prove. To prove that side opposition today have taken this debate home, I would like to sum up this debate in two clashes. First of all, the equality, and second of all, need. Before I go on to the two clashes to prove that side opposition have taken this debate home, I would like to first point the big logical fallacies that the previous speakers of side proposition have continuously been mentioning throughout today's debate. First of all, they have mentioned that this policy is actually justifiable. However, we have constantly mentioned that this is not true, and we have given specific examples in the reality where we can provide people with career support and actually provide those people with opportunity, equality of opportunity, not equality of the results, ladies and gentlemen, which can create equality issues that side opposition have been focusing on throughout today's debate. And second point, they have been mentioning that their numbers are actually meaningful. Yes, side opposition has also come up with many numbers, but the point that side opposition have been talking about side proposition's numbers was that they did not really connect back those numbers to support their own arguments. They were just numbers labeling again and again, ladies and gentlemen. No, ma'am. And third point, suddenly the third speaker of side proposition comes up and says, civil servants are different from those private companies. But ladies and gentlemen, that point has never been mentioned from first and second speaker of side proposition. And side opposition was very surprised to hear that from the third speaker of side proposition. And fourth point, they have mentioned that how they are going to actually provide women with those extra credits too. However, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that that's just an avoiding of the problem that they need to deal with. Because, ladies and gentlemen, providing women who are going to military on their choice, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't solve the problem of equality in our society, as I will further elaborate in my first clash. And I would like to also mention that side opposition was actually quite...
Exactly, ma'am.
No, ma'am. Quite confused when they mentioned about giving those women who apply for military service and finish military service, they're going to give those credits for those people too, because we were curious whether they're giving those military those credits for people who serve military because that is not their choice and mandatory, or whether they are actually sacrificing themselves for the country, because those two things are completely different. So now going on to the two clashes that I have found throughout today's debate, I would like to first explain about equality, ladies and gentlemen. The idea, the basic value of this debate that needs to be debated today, that side proposition have continuously trying to avoid, ladies and gentlemen. Side proposition and opposition have side proposition have mentioned that it will not cause equality problem, ladies and gentlemen, but the only sources that they have provided is that they're actually going to give those credits for women too. However, I have proven that this small supplementation, ladies and gentlemen, does not solve the fundamental issue of this problem, because women who are more qualified, who get more scores, are actually going to be disqualified as a result of their career too, ladies and gentlemen, and the alternative that they have provided does not solve the problem at all. In contrast, opposition side has actually proven that this policy creates problems of equality in two levels. First of all, how it is unequal to women and disabled people, and second of all, how this is unequal within the people who finish military services, ladies and gentlemen. We have given that there are only small number of people who finish military service who get the benefit from this policy, ladies and gentlemen. And the only rebuttal that they gave us is that number is, we don't believe in that numbers. But ladies and gentlemen, that is very irresponsible, since it is actually true that public, the people who are getting benefits and who are really working and getting their career to become a civil servant is very limited, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why we believe that the policy side proposition came up with is actually lacks effectiveness compared to the side effects that it will bring to our society. Now I'd like to explain about my second clash, ladies and gentlemen, which is need. I would like to say that in this policy, I would like to ask, is this policy in desperate need that with these problems that side opposition have proven throughout today's debate, it should be implemented in our society? And the answer of side opposition is no, ladies and gentlemen. And I would like to explain this point in two levels. First of all, the recognition of status quo by side proposition and side opposition. Side proposition and opposition both agreed on the point that mandatory military service, yes, we need to compensate those people for what they did, for the sacrifice they made, how they have lost their opportunity to study and continue their career. However, ladies and gentlemen, that also means that the first argument, the whole argument that the first speaker of side proposition have mentioned is actually useless, ladies and gentlemen. And I would like to also mention that the second speaker of side proposition have said that so many people agree to this policy, so we should do it. But actually, it is a very controversial issue in Korean society, ladies and gentlemen. And for this policy to be implemented, side opposition believes that there is a desperate need of more debate, ladies and gentlemen. And second aspect of my second clash is that why is especially this policy is needed in the status quo? And side opposition, as a responsible side opposition, have given how in the reality there are sufficient systems of supporting those people who finish military service, and how these existing policies can actually be developed to solve the problems that side proposition have been continuously mentioning that could be solved by giving those people extra credit, ladies and gentlemen. And we have also mentioned about how this policy is unneeded because it does not apply to broad people who finish their mandatory military service, ladies and gentlemen. And now I would like to lastly talk about the methodology that side proposition have come up with today. They have mentioned about 2-2 policy. However, this to side opposition seems that they are just avoiding their responsibilities by setting those small numbers. And we believe that those problems that have been the factors that devalue the equality of equality is still not solved with that policy, ladies and gentlemen. And I would like to prove that this policy is very ineffective as well as does not solve this problem by explaining about two cases. What if the number they gave, 2%, it does not really affect and does not really affect those women who get good numbers? That means that this policy is actually ineffective, ladies and gentlemen. And what if this number actually gives much more benefits to those people? We believe that's an unequal thing that is given as a equality of results, ladies and gentlemen, and therefore we believe that that is a self-contradiction of side proposition, and therefore on the points equality and need, side opposition brings the debate home. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 7 minutes and 25 seconds.
Now I'd like to welcome the last speaker of the opposition team. The opposition reply to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, the number was one of the main concerns of today's debate. The side proposition gave us three numbers, and that remain in my brain. First was 50.3% of the people said 2% extra credit is enough. Well, does everyone agree with it? How on earth can normal people, 3% of the normal people can actually judge with reasonable logic that 2% is about the adequate level of extra credit? This is so appealing to the the public. And one more thing, 79% of the women actually agreed on the extra credit problem. However, we want to raise a question on the source. According to one of our statistics done by the Ministry of National Defense, which is about military services, more than 80% of the women actually agreed on extra credit. So basically, this is a matter of source, and this is a matter of techniques in statistics. And everyone in this auditorium knows that there's no way that more than 80% of the women will actually support the implementation of this extra credit on those men who served military services. And the last number was 0.3%. 0.3%, only 0.3% wanted to go to military service. Everyone, is this surprising? I don't even think that 0.3% of the whole male population would like to go to military services if it's not mandatory. I mean, those three numbers were so useless, and that these three numbers didn't play any role in today's debate. And we pointed out about that point that the numbers that side proposition today suggested was not really relevant to the motion, and it didn't really relate back to our object of discussion. The side proposition gave out three main keywords. First was need, second was justification, and third was effectiveness. And we all agreed on need. So I'd like to move on to the second point, which was justification. And they said this is justified for many reasons, but one of the main reasons was that it had a good constitutional background, and they referred to Article number 39. And Article number 39 mentioned something like least equality. However, throughout the whole debate, the side opposition has proven this is not a guarantee of the least equality, and this is actually a guarantee of equality of the result of the outcome, and this is a severe reverse discrimination on the women population. And I've also mentioned a past case on the Court of Korea, and that time court said that women are actually the minorities of our societies, and they have special traits such as their motherhood, their burden to raise their kids and stuff. And these special traits also have to be considered, and this is the reason why we kept on mentioning reverse discrimination. Well, we do agree that men suffer hardships from military services. However, are men the only creatures on earth that suffer hardships? And does that mean all the hardships? Does that justify this extra credit, 2% extra credit, and the guarantee of guarantee of the result? Is it justified by only those hardships and these meaningless three numbers? And lastly, they talked about effectiveness, and they repeated the number 12.9. Again, this number, and we countered this number with 0.5% of the whole male population actually getting employed by the civil servants. And our main focus was not to mention the real number, how few men are actually being advantaged, but our focus was on that a lot of people, more than 99% of the male population, are actually left out from the range of privilege, and this can also relate back to the social justice problem that the previous speeches has well elaborated. So on these three issues, need, justification, efficiency, although our both sides kind of agreed on the need part, we kept on asking the side proposition to prove how this methodology is the best methodology we can think of in reality. And because, according to those two reasons I just gave, because they failed to fully elaborate their stance, I believe that side opposition takes this debate home. Thanks.
Speaker spoke for 3 minutes and 54 seconds.
Now I'd like to welcome our very last speaker, the government reply, to the podium.
Othello, Macbeth, Hamlet, and King Lear. These are four of the Shakespeare tragedy. And in today's debate, we found bigger tragedy in case of team opposition. So they've actually failed to put themselves in the frameworks we have created. And they were the ones that were obsessed with statistics, blaming only the statistics, not paying attention to the logic we have created, not paying attention to the elaboration we have created, just rebutting about these statistics. And they were the ones who stabbed a dagger in their back instead of stabbing a dagger to a real enemy. Rather, they try to stab the dagger at the scarecrow. So let me go on to my reply to sum up today's debate. So the team opposition kept on rebutting, saying that we lack justification, we lack efficiency, and there are much better alternatives. However, what a tragedy that they actually attacked themselves. Let me elaborate once more that the Prime Minister, and our government whip has explained. So the leader of opposition mentioned that 0.5% of people are just getting privileges, and in my speech, I also told that 12.9% are the ones who are getting their results changed due to this bonus credits. However, that means that this policy is selective. It means that it proves that there are the intellectuals, the selective intellectuals who deserves the credit, getting the results they need, and that is proved that these people are the ones who need to get reward, and that does not fail our policy. Rather, it strengthens our policy. So thank you for that. So let me go on to my second rebut or second contradiction. So they are kept on misunderstanding that our policy is definition itself, and the team opposition kept on attacking. What if getting all these assertions, not really attacking our policy itself, not really attacking the reality, the real, not superficial but real what bonus credit, what extra credit means to society. Rather, they only attack the methodology that actually made the whip speaker of team opposition fail. So I want to ask the people over here, people who actually listen to our debate, and the most honorable judges, who were obsessed with today's debate, who were obsessed with numbers, who were obsessed with statistics, that they did not consider logic, the legislative decisions that we have made, and they had also concentrated too much on number itself. They did not give us how these statistics were used for legitimate judgments, and they did not pay attention to our elaboration, and they also did not listen to our concrete reasoning of Constitution, and which is the evidence that they claim that we had not, but we actually had. So in today's debate, the team opposition actually tried to attack something that does not take a huge part on today's debate. Rather, they attacked the small parts of the statistics, the assertions, the small minor methodologies, and instead of that, they strengthened our argument by saying that this policy actually is selective and actually does not give benefits to 100% of people, because these benefits should be given to people who deserves it. So that's the reason why we take this debate home, and why we need extra credit for people who have participated in mandatory military services. So enough is enough, and we need to get tough in this motion. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 3 minutes and 54 seconds.
Well, this is the end of the grand finals of Domestic High School League. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me congratulating all the finals on their successful debate with a round of applause. Thank you. Speakers may now cross the floor and shake hands. Well, thank you for your outstanding efforts. I'm really proud of you, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you all become our future leader of Korea and the world. I wish you all the best luck. Thank you very much.